Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality Adventures. This is a non-judgmental place to explore spirituality, and we're so glad you're here. This is a viewer and listener-supported podcast, so we greatly appreciate your support. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, share, and subscribe to any of the social media content platforms that you're using. And then if you go to our website, spiritualityadventures.com, you can make a one-time donation, or with a monthly subscription, you'll gain access to our bonus content. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality Adventures. We are excited to have Jason Brasier with us today. Jason, welcome to Spirituality Adventures.
Thanks for having me.
Jason is a longtime friend of Matt Cox. And I just did an interview with Matt Cox just a few weeks ago, actually, and we posted it. And he recommended that I talk to you, Jason.
Oh, well.
And so I'm happy to reach out. So tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, how you met Matt Cox.
Oh, yeah. Well, I grew up in a small town called Willow Springs, and here in Missouri, and
South Central Missouri.
Yeah, kind of down that toward West Plains type area.
A little bit southwest, a little bit southwest. Yeah.
And have always just kind of been into theater. I'm not a very unapologetic wrestling fan, pro wrestling fan. And actually, that's what started my whole journey with filmmaking, was choreographing and directing and writing these backyard wrestling matches. And Matt was part of that. And that led to me actually getting involved with live theater as an actor. And that led to me directing my first play, which was The Hobbit. And then from there, I got into filmmaking and enjoyed the process, and just kind of told myself the more I did it, the better I would get. And the better I would get at it. Sorry, my daughter was just in here staring at me. But the better I would get at it, and I kept making films and kept writing and just trying to learn. And that was my kind of the whole background of how I got started. I mean, there was some basketball in there too at some point. And
basketball?
I love basketball. Still like basketball. So
did you play basketball?
I did for a while, but then after 2 knee injuries, I was pretty much kind of done with it.
Okay.
And, the reason for that was I was told by the coaches that I didn't know what real pain was. And I'm thinking, I've been in surgery twice. And so it just wasn't, I wanted to be a part of a basketball team like my dad had been a part of when he was in high school, and they went to state and had a good camaraderie, and it just wasn't the same. And I didn't want that. And so I chose a different path. All
right. So I just got to ask you real quick, if you still like basketball.
Oh, I love basketball.
Do you like college basketball?
Depends, because I had to a lot with college basketball. I worked a lot of ESPN games and stuff, and I would watch a lot of MSU, Missouri State, because I was always having to record them, so I followed them all the time. I like the NBA, but it's not what it used to be. But I've always been a 76ers fan.
Okay.
My dad, when he taught me basketball, would show me old VHS tapes of Julius Erving and Daryl Dawkins and all those guys. And he would show me, that's how he learned. Those were his favorites. And I just kind of, grew up liking the Sixers. And then Allen Iverson came along, and, I followed him pretty hardcore, and still have a couple of Iverson jerseys actually. And, I try to keep up with it as much as I can, but yeah.
Yeah. I just curious. My dad played NAIA basketball, and
really?
Then I grew up. He started taking me to the NAIA National Basketball Tournament in Kansas City when I was a little kid. So I followed NAIA basketball for years, and then I went to Baylor, and Baylor for the first time, and Baylor was founded in like 1845, and we just won the national championship for the first time in the history of Baylor.
Yeah.
This past spring, right? And we're ranked number 1 in the nation right now. So it's a good time to be a Baylor fan. At any rate. Well, so, all right. So you got into wrestling, got you into theater, like pro wrestling.
Yes.
Got you into theater, which I can't imagine that there's like tons of that angle to that story out there. I don't know. Maybe there is. Maybe I'm wrong.
There is. People always try to say that pro wrestling's fake. I never saw it as that because I started watching how they fell, and I started seeing how it kind of looked like they fell, like how a stuntman would fall sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I just started studying it. And I started realizing that pro wrestling was a live action choreographed stunt show. And so it was part athleticism, mm-hmm. part acting, and part stunt work. Yeah. And if, I would hear terms like, wrestlers who could lose good. I didn't know what that meant. And I started realizing it was like you were making, there was a way to lose a match and make it look awesome. And still you would come out, even if you lost the match, you would still look good. And it became I became fascinated with the art form of it and just started studying it, and then started writing, directing, and choreographing our own matches and choosing silly wrestling names. And, so it really wasn't that hard of a transition to go from that to being on stage and then behind the scenes.
Well, so I got to ask you who your favorite pro wrestlers were when you first started watching and getting into it. Your early favorites.
I grew up in what was considered the Monday Night Wars between WCW, World Championship Wrestling, and the World Wrestling Federation, which is now World Wrestling Entertainment. I would have my favorite. I would flip back and forth because I knew they were watching each other. And if somebody did something over here, I knew somebody was going to try to do something crazier on this channel just to get more ratings. On WCW, I love Sting, and he's still wrestling. He's in AEW now. Sting was awesome, and I love that era. Who didn't love Stone Cold Steve Austin? He was the guy who was the storyline of sticking it to the boss, and that storyline people can identify with on some level. And Vince McMahon played the evil boss to a T, and you just got into it. It was just fun to kind of get lost in it. And kind of like a movie, you kind of just suspend your disbelief. And then in doing that and losing your disbelief, you realize that they just got you if you know what's going on. And that was like very respectful to me. Like, wow, you guys actually, I forgot about what you guys have choreographed all this, or we're calling it in the ring, if you will. That's what they do a lot. And it was just exciting. The Rock was awesome. I love The Rock, Triple H. My favorite was Cactus Jack. And he was hardcore. He was also known as Mankind in WWF for a while. And he had another persona called Dude Love, but I really didn't care for that character. But Cactus Jack was his character that he took to Japan, and he was in the Kawasaki Dream King of the Deathmatch tournament in Japan. And he got in this fight with Terry Funk, who I also love Terry Funk. And they didn't have ropes, they had barbed wire around it. And they had barbed wire boards that had little concussion things, like if you stepped on it, it exploded. And some people thought, it's just probably powder. Mick Foley, Cactus Jack, he got third-degree burns from it and made that match just look awesome. And to this day, I'm sure Matt behind camera going, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Mick Foley was a guy. I mean, he was amazing. And the fact that he can still walk right now is amazing to me. And I hope I can meet him someday, because he's one of those wrestlers that I just want to be like, you were amazing. You know, the entertainment value and the work that he did to make people believe was just amazing.
Yeah. So, you know, when I was growing up, I just thought it was fake. I didn't watch it much, but then I at some point, it's been a long time ago, but at some point I started appreciating the talent, the skill, the choreography, the acting, the whole thing. And I realized too that the guys were a lot more athletic and skillful than I'd first ever imagined. Right.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like you kind of start realizing that the reason they have wrestling school is because if one of them, you got to protect each other, and your job is to make the other person look good or get them whatever the whole thing is in the match. But you got to know how to do it correctly, because if you don't do it correctly, you could get hurt.
Yeah.
You know, and when you see accidents happen, it's unfortunate. But sometimes accidents do happen. I mean, I was just at a match a couple of months ago here in Springfield, because they were showing the Flying Greek trailer actually at this event, and they had it was a Texas death match. And I was thinking, Missouri has some strong rules against blood, so I don't think we're going to see any blood. Well, somebody got pile driven on a chair, and it had a little bitty metal piece sticking up, and this guy's head got sliced.
Oh, ouch.
And he was on the other side of the ring, but he got up, and I thought maybe he had like crawled into the ring and had done something. And then I saw him up there when he was wrestling, and he wiped his face like this, and then it just came down again. I was like, oh, he has got to have a concussion. And it was an accident. But that was pretty rough. So accidents happen. That was an unfortunate accident with just, chair that was looked at. But
I have a buddy who was from a small town in Kansas, and this Kansas State champion wrestler. I think maybe 2 or 3 years in high school, and then then his brother was a Kansas State champion wrestler, and then his dad was also a Kansas State champion wrestler. So it was the only family in Kansas that had 3 family members all be Kansas State champions in high school. And then he went and wrestled at a college in Missouri. Gosh darn it, I'm going to blank on the name of the college. It's not Missouri Western in St. Joe. It's one out by Sedalia, Missouri, but I forgot the name of it. Anyway, one of the Missouri State colleges. He wrestled there, but he met Bobby Lashley there, and I know Bobby. I've talked to Bobby many times, and
he's a big boy.
Yeah.
He's a big boy.
Anyway, that's the only pro guy that I've ever met and talked to, the pro wrestler. Anyway.
No, it's all good. I've met a couple. I mean, Chris Jericho, I've met a couple times. He was one of my favorites, and he's still wrestling today. And actually, Medusa, who narrated my film, I grew up watching her, and here she is narrating my documentary. And
sweet.
She's become like family, and my daughter calls her auntie. So
yeah. So you had this small town experience. You got into wrestling. That got you into theater. So you said the first theater that you directed was The Hobbit?
I did The Hobbit. I was a big Lord of the Rings fan.
Yeah, me too.
I love the extended cuts.
Me too.
I will watch them all the time. And
I bought the box set, so I could watch all of that stuff. Yeah.
Well, I've got the versions that they don't have anymore, where it looked like the books, like the old books.
That's what I got up. I got it.
Those are awesome. I love them.
Yeah.
And, I wanted to do fantasy. I hadn't done fantasy. I had done, I had really as a kid tried to make scary movies, and here I was thinking I was going to do Dracula, but then I thought, The Hobbit, that would be a real fun challenge. And it was another learning experience. And as Matt will tell you, the Star Theater is an old silent film theater that's not that big. It probably seats about 200 people, maybe 300, but I think that's pushing it. And so you have a very small stage to work on, and my producers came in that first week and they handed me a book of it that said how to direct a play. I knew what they were trying to do and I appreciated it, but I wanted to do completely the opposite of what every play had done in that theater, just to be different. I apparently made them mad because I tossed the book over my shoulder and said, here's what we're going to do. I was doing that as a way to excite the cast and crew. Oh, we're going to do something different. Great. My producers didn't show up until Tech Week, 4 weeks later. I had to take care of everything for 4 weeks. I was in high school. And it was a big learning experience because we had a big falling out, me and one of the producers after that, because they were trying to, blame a lot of stuff on me that was kind of on them for not showing up. But, you live and you learn. And that was an experience that I'll never forget.
Yeah. So you started, man, you've got so many things like filmmaker, documentarian, writer, theater, poet, educator, abstract artist.
Oh, you've done your homework.
Like there's so much stuff here. Did you end up going to college? Did you study?
I did.
Did you study acting or theater or directing or writing? What was your?
My degree is in mass media production, and I did that instead of just a straight up film degree because I wanted to have broadcast experience in there, so I could do film and broadcast, which served that. Especially if I was going to stay around this area, it was going to serve me better. To have that kind of diversity. And while in college, I did a little bit of my own stuff, but a lot of it, I didn't really direct anything until after I graduated. Well, I take that back. I did a documentary in 2007 on my own. That really wasn't a student film, but I did it as a student. And it was about my dad's basketball team in Willow that went to state and got screwed out of the championship. And that was called The Champions. And that's actually on YouTube. You can watch the full film. And I was kind of more like a fly on the wall in college and watching people and just trying to, what do I need to do? Oh, I like what they did. Oh, I won't do that. And I was just kind of making notes to myself. And then right after college, I started doing the early versions of what they would call web series, and I did a fake rockumentary that was kind of a comedy called The Sessions. And then that led to me doing a post-apocalyptic Western series called Drifter Broken Road and Drifter Lonesome Highway. So it just kind of stair-step and slowly built from there. And I just, I always kind of felt like, I did really good on that, but I know I learned a lot on this project. So I know the next thing I do is going to be better. Mm-hmm. So that was always kind of exciting because I was always like, I don't know what challenges we're going to face and how to get this one shot that I want versus, having all the money in the world doesn't mean that I'm going to get that shot still.
Right.
So I kind of like that rogue, independent spirit about filmmaking in general. Mm-hmm. And just trying to make it happen. I think that's what I love about it the most is kind of that aspect and camaraderie of your cast and crew of like, how can we make this work? And how can this be really good? And because on the day you get there, 90% of the time, something's going to change and you're going to have to adapt to a situation. And I saw too many filmmakers in college who did not want to adapt. And I think I don't like tooting my own horn, but like, I feel like that's what's made me more valuable to even clients doing client work is I'm very flexible and adaptable to whatever happens, what we need to do to still get the best product, and it just makes sense to me.
Yeah. So which college did you go to?
Missouri State University.
Okay. Mm-hmm. In Springfield.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And who were your influences for filmmaking? Who were your influences for documentaries? Who have been some of maybe your mentors?
Kind of thing. Early on in film, and Matt will know this. John Carpenter definitely was a huge influence early on as a kid. He still is. So I love his films. And Sam Raimi was definitely one. Clint Eastwood, Sergio Leone. Now these are the ones who first started really inspiring me, but I started really falling in love with classic cinema. And I started like loving the works of John Ford. I started loving the works of
my dad's a John Ford fan, even though he wouldn't even know it, but all the movies he loves are John Ford movies, Well,
then I started really diving into, I love the film Casablanca, and I love Michael Curtiz, who directed that. And so I watched a couple of his films, and it just kind of snowballed.
Yeah.
And I would say
Casablanca is a great film.
Oh, it's fantastic. Definitely. And for me, if I look at how things are now and where I'm at in my career, those were the ones that started it. I would say I'm very influenced by Louis Buñuel. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I don't. Tell me about him.
He was a surrealist. He did a lot of films. Like he did a film with Salvador Dali. His first film, and it was a silent film. And it was called and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation just because I know I am. Un Chien Andalou, which translated, I think, was an Andalusian dog. The film makes no sense. It is literally just an absurd piece of visual art, and it's actually just a dream. Mm-hmm. And you've had those. If you've ever had a dream that's made no sense, that's what this short film was. Mm-hmm. And people try to find meaning in it, and there's no point to it.
Yeah.
And so people would say, well, this is what this means. And then you had Salvador Dali and Louis Buñuel just kind of laughing about it because it's like, no, that's not, there's no point, And so it was always kind of fun to see that interpretation. I didn't get it in college because I wasn't there yet, but I get it now more than I ever did. After I started doing some abstract art, it just started making sense to me with my abstract paintings. But Louis Buñuel, I love Ken Burns, but he's kind of an acquired taste for a lot of people just because he doesn't leave anything out. Like that's why he does series, is because he can't. I don't think he could make a movie that fits within an hour and 20 minutes. I just don't think he can do it. And
I have most of Ken Burns's series up in my library right now.
Yeah. Well, his stuff is always
it's amazing.
I love Mark Twain, the one he did on Mark Twain.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one yet. I need to see that one because I'm a Missouri guy.
One of my favorites.
Yeah.
I love the Dust Bowl that he did. I loved the one he did on Prohibition.
Prohibition, right.
It was always fun. And it's just I'm a visual guy, and I was always that guy in high school when it was time to watch a documentary. I got more out of that
than
reading the history book because I'm a person. And so that's why I like him. Werner Herzog.
I loved his national parks.
That was
I loved, of course, I love the jazz. I like jazz anyways. I've always been a jazz fan. I loved his jazz series, and baseball was fun too. But anyway, I like them all. Yeah, I really don't. I haven't disliked one yet,
Yeah. Well, Werner Herzog is he did a lot of great documentaries. I love Grizzly Man that he did. That's still one of my favorites.
Especially the ending, right?
Yeah.
You could see that one coming. It had a lot of foreshadowing.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like, but you know what though? The way he did the ending though, and how he edited it together, made it kind of poignant because
it was.
He was trying to help the lady let go because she still had the tape,
right?
And that's traumatizing.
It is.
But what makes it so hard sometimes is Warner, he's got that thick German accent. And so even when he's trying to be helpful, it sounds like he's still angry. Yeah. He's like, you need to stop. And it's just like, calm down. He's like, I'm not yelling. But his films are always a great watch. gosh, there's so many. Like Guy Madden, he is an experimental art house filmmaker from Winnipeg, Manitoba. And
I don't know him.
I actually, the first film I heard about him was called Brand Upon the Brain. It was a feature-length silent film. So I'm thinking, what? And this is back in 05, I think. 04, 05, something like that when I heard about it. But what fascinated me was he was doing this silent film, but they had a live orchestra playing and they had live Foley artists doing sound effects. And then every now and then he would write a narration. So it was kind of like a live experience. And I was like, that's so kind of cool, kind of taking old school things that people aren't doing anymore and making a new experience with something that you filmed. And it's taking me 10 years to find a copy of that film because it's now out of print at the moment through a Criterion collection. But I found a copy on Amazon like a week ago, $30, and I'm hoping it's brand new, but at this point I don't care. But it should be here by Christmas, and I'm very excited about that.
Nice.
And I actually interviewed him a couple of months ago on as part of experimental online film festival I was doing. And so I got to interview him, and he's kind of become a little bit of a mentor. I never had one. I always wanted one, but I've asked him a lot of questions, and he's been able to just be brutally honest with me and talk to me about things. And he's kind of a renegade when it comes to filmmaking because he loves narrative film, but all his films are so different. Like he did one called My Winnipeg, and he was trying to mythicize Winnipeg, Manitoba. And so it's about him going through his mind on a train, looking at and reliving these memories, but some of the memories are not exactly accurate. But he keeps them there, and it made it kind of a really fascinating, study of how we look back at where we grew up, and that's one of my favorites. But he's definitely been a huge influence, especially in the last few years. And gosh, I could go on forever. I love Peter Jackson just because he's so creative in how he does things. I mean, Lord of the Rings, but if you watch They Shall Not Grow Old, his documentary he did on World War I, with how he used the technology he created from his movies to use and re-enhance film that had not been seen in 100 years. And it was silent film, and he had people do professional lip reading. And they would go through and they would pick out people and they would see what they were saying. And then they would go and find what regiment those people were from. And they would go get actors to come in and do the voices to what they were saying. So he was able to add sound to film.
Wow.
And it was just very awesomely ghostly. And I just, I have a lot of respect for him and what he does.
That's wild.
Yeah. I mean, those are the main few. If we go into favorite films, that's a completely different topic. But
well, that's fun too, though. Favorite film. We could do that too, real quick. But I want to get to the Flying Greek. But let's do. Yeah, tell me a couple of your favorite. Favorite films is like doesn't it change a little bit?
I can tell you my top two.
Yeah,
they have not changed that much.
Really? Okay.
My top five changes a little bit.
Yeah.
But Dr. Zhivago, which the film from the 60s that David Lean directed.
Yeah.
Omar Sharif.
Yeah, I've watched it.
I absolutely just love that film. The production of it all, like the grandness of it. And I'm just fascinated by a love story set during the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. It just fascinated me. And the set design, like I remember the house being all iced over, but that was all wax that they had dripped to make it look like all ice. And I love that. My second one is Once Upon a Time in the West. Peter Fonda and Charles Bronson. Those two films, completely polar opposites, but just the camera work is such very influential on me. Beyond that, I could get into some Louis Buñuel films like The Exterminating Angel that he did.
I don't know that one.
People are trying to leave a house and they can't leave the house. They don't know why. He never explains why. You know, it's some supernatural thing, but it's never acknowledged. And it's so absurd, but it's actually about how ridiculous the high society people can be. That's what his whole thing was. Last Temptation of Christ. I absolutely love that movie. I was told as a kid I should never watch it. And I'm glad I finally did. I understand why some people don't like it, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But I felt like I had more of a spiritual experience watching that film than I did with Passion of the Christ.
Yeah.
And it was just because of the humanistic side of Jesus that a lot of people don't focus on. And
right.
I love that movie for that. I love My Winnipeg by Guy Madden, like I was saying, and Eraserhead, which I know Matt's going to like that one because he likes Eraserhead. David Lynch as well.
He's fist pumping.
There you go.
Oh yeah, tattoos on his leg.
Oh, you got an Eraserhead tattoo?
Yeah, I got Henry tattooed on my calf.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Do you have the lyrics to the song anywhere?
No, I want to get the Lady in the Radiator on the other side of my leg.
Yeah, the in heaven everything will be fine.
Everything is fine. Yeah.
God, that movie's so incredibly unnerving, but you can't not watch it. But Blue Velvet by David Lynch, freaking amazing.
Yeah,
that movie was just amazing.
Yeah.
But I can get into stuff like I love Empire Strikes Back. I love Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade.
Yeah.
I love all those movies too.
Right.
I love escapism as well, as much as the next person. But classic film to me is, even silent film like Metropolis is. And 1926. Those are masterpieces of cinema.
Yeah, I don't do, I've never done film, never written, never directed, never acted, never done anything. But I'm a bit more than just I find my favorite directors and then I literally watch everything they've ever done.
Oh yeah.
I watch the credits at the end of movies. I watched, there's a lot of things. And then I even went back and watched all of the Oscar winners from day one. And then I went back and watched all the top film 100. What's the film thing that does the top 100 films of all time? Yeah. AFI. And I watched all of those and, I've watched a ton of black and whites. I've never hardly watched any silence though, but I've watched a lot of the old black and whites. And
it's an acquired taste for some people, but I would always show it in film classes I taught because it's a lost art form because we automatically just want to digitally do it now. And I'm kind of like Christopher Nolan, love him. If I can do as much practical as I can, I'd rather do that because it just makes the film feel a little more real. Now, if you can get something by me that's CG, bravo, you did a great job. But that's why I like the Lord of the Rings movies because it's a mixture of CG and forced perspective and miniatures. I love that mixture of just those styles of filmmaking. I think it just makes a cooler film to me. But it becomes more artful to me. Not that digital art and people doing digital is not, but there's just a different way about it. Like when they built, when you look at the set for Minas Tirith and how big that thing was for a miniature, good God, I was like, that took a lot of work, and it was amazing. So,
well, let's talk about your most recent documentary,
okay.
The one that just released. It looked to me like you started this project in 2018. Is that right?
That's when we announced it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's just like fill our audience in a little bit. You crossed paths evidently, or discovered somehow a former pro wrestler who was selling jewelry in Springfield.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much, because I worked on a show locally. There was a talk show called The Mystery Hour, and he was a guest on the show. And he's up there talking. I was just laughing. He was a funny guy, a great storyteller. And then he brings up this picture of him and Andre the Giant, where Andre is literally holding him up on his shoulder. And I was sitting there just like, how have I not heard of this guy? So it stuck in the back of my mind. I had to finish another project first, but as soon as that project was done, I called him. And I went and met him and at a little European cafe here in town on Square. And we talked for 2 hours or so. And I was just hearing his stories about him and Randy Savage when Savage was still playing baseball. So he had to wear a mask when he was wrestling. So he could get away with it. Hearing stories about Dusty Rhodes, Andre the Giant. I was just blown away by this guy's life. And I just went with my gut and I'm like, there's something that needs to be told in this. And so I was like, can I tell your story as a documentary? And we talked about it and came up and, agreed how we'd do it. It was kind of off to the races then. It took a lot longer than I wanted it to. A pandemic definitely played in a part of that. Because we were trying to put the final stages and then the pandemic hit. And that just derailed everything there. But I spent 2 years trying to find footage of him wrestling, and all trails led to WWE buying out all of these archives in the last 10 years. And I even had a lawyer contact WWE just so I knew I was either going to get a no or a huge number or I'd be ignored. I was ignored every time. And even when I had a lawyer contact, I'm trying to be professional.
And let's give this guy's name. His
wrestling name was Mike Pappas, the Flying Greek. That's what his wrestling name was.
Mike Pappas, the Flying Greek. His real name is
Manoli Savenis. He's from
okay.
So
and he would wrestle. His wrestling career was in the 70s.
Yeah, he started in late 60s through the 70s.
Okay.
Yeah. We always say from like there was a 10-year span between in the 60s and 70s that he was there, about 78.
All right.
And he really.
So you got a lawyer to contact WWE to find film footage of this guy wrestling,
just to see, because like all the trails that I had been down had led to people saying, "Well, WWE Network just bought us out like a year ago," and so I knew that they had footage. I just needed to get them to tell me yes, no, here's how much it's going to cost, or they would ignore me, and they ignored us. So it forced me to get creative because he could actually still fit in his wrestling attire. And so I did some shots of him, kind of like I call them dream match shots, where we got like a light pointing straight down, got a fog machine and had a black backdrop, and did these kind of artsy shots of in and out of focus of him wrestling somebody and putting on his old gear. It was a lot of fun. And it also gave it a really good opportunity, and he actually got me in the ring and it was basically showing me the ropes, like how to throw a forearm properly and how to take a fall. And we did, it was fun. It was great fun. And when it was finally done, it was really, I use the word surreal a lot just because when you finish a project, it's kind of like, it seems like a dream because you work so hard on it. Now it seems so far behind you since you started it. And he tells me, "Hey, I'm suffering from colon cancer, stage 4. And that hit me hard because my grandfather had passed away from colon cancer about, God, it's been 6 years. Yeah, 5 or 6 years ago. And so that hit me hard. And so I knew we needed to show the film because with that, he could still be around for 5 more years, or we don't know. So we kind of threw it into overdrive and picked a date in early December. And actually, I think a couple of weeks before the premiere, he called me and said that his cancer had shrunk by 60%. It was in good shape. So that was exciting, and especially leading up and going into the premiere here locally. And we actually got, I actually got, not just me, but we all did. The film got into a film festival, and it's my first actual film festival. Like, I've been in web fests for the last like 10 or 12 years for the web series we've done. So this got into the Santa Fe Film Festival in New Mexico. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to go to that.
The Flying Greek is going to be premiered. Is that what you'd say? Or just you entered it there?
We had a premiere essentially
in Springfield.
But
on December 10th. Is that right?
Yeah, that's when we had it. Yeah.
Okay.
But not too long ago. And
at the Fox Theater.
Yeah, the historic Fox Theater that's been down the square since the 30s.
Okay. Did that go well?
Oh, it went extremely well. I was very happy for the turnout we got. I think we would have more, but it was storming really bad that night.
Okay.
I was kind of anxious because I was sitting there going, please don't lose power in the middle of the film. Don't lose power in the middle of the film.
How long is it?
It's only 45 minutes, believe it or not.
Okay.
I got to a point where I was trying to push it to an hour, and I could tell that I was forcing it. When I'm watching it, I could just tell it was not meshing together. So we cut 15 minutes out of it, and it worked extremely well. That being said, there's a lot of stuff that we didn't use. And so I've got 5 episodes cut so far, but we are actually taking audio from the stuff we didn't use, and we're doing an audio documentary companion piece that's going to be on podcast. But it's all audio of the stuff we didn't use, like all his wrestling stories, like where he got his jaw dislocated in a match and things like that.
Yeah. What stands out to you in his career that made you want to tell this story?
That he had done so much and was getting bigger pops from the crowds in the original Madison Square Garden than Harley Race. And I had multiple people tell me that he would be walking to the ring, and you would think the champion had just walked in, but no, it was him. It was Mike Pappas, because he was just that entertaining. He was doing things. I mean, if you see pictures of his drop kick, I mean, it's the most perfect parallel drop kick I've ever seen in my life. And he was doing flying head scissors. I mean, he was doing things that seem so normal now in wrestling that people just were blown away by him. And also his, the heartbreak of his story, where a promoter would promise him something and then wouldn't follow through. And it would he would get screwed over essentially. And, a lot of wrestlers have tales like that, but there was just something about this guy who was a really small guy who.
How tall is he?
God, 5'6", 5'5".
Yeah. I was trying to guess from pictures I've seen of him, but he looks so small.
Yeah. There's one of him at the premiere of me where we did like a wrestling pose together, and you could see how much smaller he is compared to me. But he he was this larger than life character, and he was a small guy. And some people just walked over him because they didn't like him because he was getting bigger pops from the crowd than they were. And I've seen documentaries on Hulk Hogan. I've seen documentaries on Dusty Rhodes. I wanted to tell a story about a guy, like when you see that picture of Andre holding him on the shoulder, the Andre the Giant documentary is really good that they did. But to me, I was like, I want to know about him. I know about Andre, but what's this guy on his shoulder? What's his story? And that's kind of the way I tried to approach it.
Yeah. And here he is living in Springfield. How do you wind up in Springfield selling jewelry? Is he?
Well, his jewelry, he learned that trade when he was a kid in Greece. So he can actually make jewelry. He had learned that as a trade in Greece when he was a kid. And he had done it off and on while he was here in America and living here when he got here. But he had traveled through Springfield and had done a couple of shows as a wrestler. And he really liked the area. And that was simply it. Whenever he retired or went wrestling, he just kind of came to this area because he liked
Interesting.
it. He calls himself the Greek hillbilly now.
The Greek hillbilly?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, so you're like, one of the things you talk about is education. So you've taught film stuff in high schools, universities, that kind of thing?
I taught adjunct faculty at Missouri State for a couple of years.
And what courses have you taught?
One of the big ones I taught was Media 365, and that was a crash course in writing, directing, editing, producing, and filming. It was a crash course in the whole thing where they had to cut 2 or 3 short films in the semester.
What, I always try to talk about spirituality some way or another. And as you're a storyteller, and for me, there's just, I don't know, just the human spirit, the way that we find connection with ourselves, others, and something bigger than us is all a part of the spirituality. And for me, creativity, capturing other people's stories is, I don't know, there's something about that for me has a spiritual nature to it. And I'm not trying to define that so much as I am just reflect on it. I'm just curious what your spiritual journey is, do you even think about that kind of stuff when you're in your work and that kind of, I'm just curious.
My spiritual journey is interesting because I kind of have a little bit of religious trauma that I actually started exploring during quarantine through experimental film. And my wife, who is a school counselor, helped me kind of understand a few things about that. And going to church as a kid, it was never a family thing that did this. It was just people in church in general. And the one thing at this church that I kept getting told as a kid was, if your next thought or breath is not for God, you are essentially sinning because you're not living the way he wants you to live. I got told that more than once as a kid, younger than 10, and in my teens by people in this church and the church camp I went to. And it caused me to have, it was actually the cause of my OCDs, because whenever I was real, oh crap, I haven't been thinking about God, or I started to repent.
Oh my gosh.
I started to repent. And wow. It became a repetitiveness.
Interesting.
And I really went down the rabbit hole. And the one thing, and some people are like, well, that's stupid. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's a psychological thing, but whatever. I stepped away from church, and I'm still currently not like a full-time member at any church, but I had to step away because whenever I would walk through the church doors, I was triggered by that. And I would get into that mindset because it's almost like you're conditioned at that point. And I had to step away from it and when I did that, I saw my OCDs really decrease because that was the trigger mechanism.
Interesting.
But, and for me, it's been an interesting journey because, there's been a lot of things that I've changed since growing up in, Matt will know what I'm talking about, the fishbowl effect of growing up in a small town when you kind of look back into it going, I was a part of all that drama. And when you actually get out into the real world and start experiencing things and people, when you start to say, well, I believe this now, and your former youth pastors attack you on social media to the point that it makes your wife cry, it's very disheartening, because I feel like at some point people have lost the plot. And it's just, and like I've said before, to each their own, because everybody's journey is different and we all come from different, life from different angles. This just happens to be my angle that I've had. Mm-hmm. And there are people who just use religion in general, not just Christianity, any religion in general, to manipulate easily, because especially now in today's age, I feel that the world doesn't make sense anymore. It really doesn't, as much as it used to, or what we thought made sense after quarantine. And I think we're all grasping at anything to make sense of it, to make any sort of sense of what's going on and make ourselves feel better. And I feel that a lot of people who do that, I'll be done in a second. Sorry, my daughter. Yeah. But I'm not trying to get too deep on this, but sorry, she distracted me. I forgot where I was. Sorry.
People using religions to.
Yes, thank you, Matt. Thank you, sir. Since we're in a weird time in our world, I feel like now people in general, everywhere, are looking for anything to grasp onto, to make sense of what's going on, to make themselves feel better. And it opens up a little bit of a dangerous door, because if you're trying to accept and find anything that makes sense to make yourself feel better, I feel like that's when people can easily be manipulated into different things. Now, does that mean that the church itself is manipulating people? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there are people who are using those certain things to bring people in more easily, because they're more susceptible, if that makes sense. And that's when you start getting conspiracy theory groups. You start getting cults more than anything, cult-like mentalities. And it can be a very dangerous line to walk. And that's just religions in general, because people take you can take any aspect of Christianity, or you can take Muslim, you could take atheist, you could take anything. Mm-hmm. And if the person's looking for something to make sense of the world, and you play to what they're wanting to hear, think about that with some of the, suicide bombers that get sucked in to those jihad groups. Mm-hmm. And people are using religion and different things and situations to manipulate a situation, something. And to me, I think it's right now we're kind of in a very strange time. In quarantine, I really explored that, a couple of my experimental films that I did when I had time. And I'm not saying I'm right, but that's just, I had a lot of time to think, 'cause I'm sitting at home and I'm just editing and really just thinking about these things. And it's one of those things that just, everything right now feels very raw when it comes to talking about spirituality, or because everything kind of feels meshed together in some way, shape, or form. Because you could sit there and say, just as an example, I'm not trying to shoot, this is an example. You could have people who are QAnon believers and saying they're Christian, but over here you could have a group of Christians who are not QAnon, but they all believe the same thing. So everything feels kind of meshed together. So, it's kind of like with Republicans and Democrats. Do you believe in abortion? No. Oh, so you're, a Democrat. No, I'm still blah, blah, blah. People automatically assume and mesh these different things together because the ideologies become intermingled. And I think that's on purpose on some level. But, I'm not a political scientist by any means. So, sorry.
Yeah, well, religious trauma is a real deal. And certainly, the stories of wounding that's happened to people through religion they're just off the charts, right? It's crazy. And I don't know that, sometimes it even happens unintentionally all those worlds, but
especially with like those people telling me what they told me, I don't think they were probably doing it on purpose. I think they were genuinely just trying to tell me what they believed. But as a young kid, that's a tough standard. Like if your next thought isn't God, then you don't really love God. Yeah. I mean, I was drugged through I was drugged through when I started making my films, people were always like, hey, when are you going to make a Jesus film? Hey, I did one for church one time, but I did it on my terms. I didn't want to so it was kind of like a silent film mashup, but they were like, well, when are you going to make it really like a big one? And I was thinking, if I make one, you're probably not going to like it because like if I tell the story of John the Baptist was not a very clean person and he looked like a homeless dude, and he's perceived as a different, you know what I mean? And so it's just kind of like, I like that raw, like that approach to the film, like to filmmaking, storytelling,
Yeah. What, did you have a moment in making this documentary of the Flying Greek documentary that you found is like something that really felt very inspirational, but what doesn't really fit in the box of church or religion or anything like that? You know what I mean? That was like super spiritual or it's just inspirational. Just want to throw the spiritual word out and just use the word inspirational.
It is, man, there's a lot of stuff that have been like, even between takes when you would just talk to him, he was always, and he still is to this day, so encouraging. He may not even know you. And I remember after just meeting him a couple times, he was always just, when he asked you, how are you doing? It didn't feel like just a conversation starter. He genuinely wanted to know. And he still, when I see him, how are you doing, Jason? And I can tell him because I can tell he genuinely wants to know how I'm doing. It's not just a moment for a small conversation. He wants to know. He wants to, really, kind of have that one-on-one with you. And ever since the beginning of that filmmaking, I've always been like, oh, we're going to go film Manoli. And I knew I was going to enjoy it. No matter what we were talking about and what we were doing, it was always a very, philosophical experience because he always would bring his kind of unique philosophy to life. And it was just, a lot of it has stuck with me. That's lot cool. Of it has really stuck with me. Did he also help start a Greek Orthodox church in Springfield? Did I read that right? Yeah, he did. And we didn't really go into much detail on some of that. Just because there was, I think there was something that happened there that they didn't want to talk about, which I thought was fine. Yeah.
I'm just curious. I just thought that's kind of interesting angle. Well,
he helped do that. And, I even tried to put that in the film, but it just kind of felt like something that really didn't fit. It felt weird to be in there. It's kind of like, it felt like, oh, and by the way, here's this.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
It really did, but yeah.
Well, cool. Well, how can people find your work? If people are wanting to watch your stuff, find your work, connect with you, how do they do that?
Right now, I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. Jason Brasier Film, and on Instagram. And
Jason Brasier, Braiser. Jason Brasier. Brasier. Sorry.
No, you're cool.
I spelled it wrong on my thing here. I'm glad I spelled it out. Brasier. Okay.
Yeah,
and
it's I'm on YouTube right now. You can look. My channel is actually called Unconscious. Wow, I can't talk. Unconscious Streams.
Unconscious Streams. Okay.
Yeah, and it has a lot of my web series. It has everything I've kind of done, amalgamation of everything. My website's going to be getting revamped in the new year. I have it down right now because I'm going to be revamping it so I can have some video on demand stuff of my.
And is that the Experimental Film Odyssey?
No, that's my online. That's my online experimental film festival that I'm doing as well. I just became enamored with that during quarantine, and I saw a need for something that just focused on it, and I really find the art side of film and that very inspirational. And so we just had our first one, and it had a really great turnout for it being online and streaming, and I'm going to be doing that again.
All right. Cool. And then this new documentary, people can't really access it right now, right?
Not at the moment. We are going to have an online showing in the new year sometime. I don't know what that's going to be just yet. Just because when you're sending stuff out to festivals, they don't really like it if you've had a mass release. So we're trying to walk the line on that a little bit at the moment, just so we can get to a couple more festivals and see if we can get some awards behind it. My hope would be that I can release it fully, either on Blu-ray or DVD. I think we'll start exploring that.
So if you get it into the Kansas City Film Festival,
I would love it.
It comes out in when does the Kansas City Film Festival, in the spring?
I'd have to look and see. I think that sounds right.
People could see it there.
Yes, I would absolutely.
Kansas City folks, anyway. Yeah. Cool. Well, Jason, thanks so much. Appreciate you doing that. Love the Matt connection, the Willow connection, all that stuff. Wrestling in the backyard.
Oh yeah.
Matt's wrestling name was what?
Matt Mayhem.
Matt Mayhem. All right. And you actually have film footage of this.
It's on YouTube. You can watch the pay-per-view. It was called CWA Carnage.
CWA Carnage. Matt,
it's on my YouTube channel. You can watch the
Matt Mayhem wrestling in the backyard with Jason Brasier. And what was your wrestling name, Jason?
I had a couple, but during that, since it was a church type of I think Matt, didn't we call me the disciple or something?
Yeah.
Oh, the disciple.
Boy, he loved that. Yeah. My finishing move though. But do you remember my finishing move's name? Because Matt, you're the one that came up with the name.
I can't think of it.
Divine Intervention.
That's what I forgot.
All right.
And it was giant DDT. I love that.
Not quite as good as rapper names, but at any rate, we'll go.
It is what it is. If I wasn't the disciple, I was Jason Extreme. So.
There you go. Well, thanks so much, Jason. Great to talk with you. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to Spirituality Adventures, and we'll see you next time. This concludes today's episode. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Remember to like, share, or subscribe to the social media platform that you're using. And then go to our website, spiritualityadventures.com, and make a one-time donation, or you can subscribe monthly and receive our special bonus content. Thanks so much.